Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout the annals of sacred history, myths of rebellion and fallen angels have captured the human imagination. In the West, the name Lucifer immediately conjures the image of a shining angel cast down from heaven, later fused with Satan, the prince of darkness. Yet buried in one of the lesser-known ancient texts, the Ethiopian Book of Jubilees, lies a strikingly different and more complicated story, one that speaks not only of Lucifer, but of another dark prince, a rival figure hidden from mainstream Christian tradition, whose name has been almost erased from collective memory. This other Lucifer is not found in the familiar canon of the Bible, but rather in an ancient Jewish work preserved most fully in Ethiopia, where for centuries it was considered sacred alongside the Book of Enoch. To trace his shadow is to uncover a forgotten strand of biblical history and a tale of rebellion, demons, and humanity's struggle against unseen powers. The Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis, was written sometime between the 2nd century BCE and the early 1st century CE, most likely in Hebrew by Jewish scribes of the Second Temple era. While the book eventually fell out of favor in both Rabbinic Judaism and mainstream Christianity, it survived in full only in the ancient language of Guizi, where it was preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. In Ethiopia, Jubilees was regarded not as a strange apocryphon, but as divinely inspired scripture, treasured alongside other banned works such as 1 Enoch. Western scholars only rediscovered it in the 19th century, and it is from this Ethiopian preservation that we glimpse a theology very different from what later European Christianity constructed. What is striking about Jubilees is its portrayal of the unseen world. In Genesis, the fall of man, the flood, and the scattering at Babel are told in brief, but in Jubilees these episodes are reinterpreted with the influence of angels and demonic forces. We encounter not only the Watchers, those angels who lusted after human women and begot giants, but also the dark rulers who followed them. Among these, one figure stands apart, a being called Mastema. His very name means hatred or hostility, and in Jubilees he emerges as a kind of rival adversary, separate from but parallel to the Satan of later theology. Mastema appears as the great prince of evil spirits, leading the offspring of the fallen angels who survived the flood. When Noah prayed for God to bind and remove these spirits so that humanity might finally live free from their corruption, it is Mastema who interceded. He begged God to leave at least 1/10 of these spirits under his command so that they might continue to tempt and test humanity. To the shock of modern readers, God consented. Thus Mastema was granted authority to remain on earth as a ruler over demons, the great adversary of humankind, not wholly outside God's design but operating within it. Unlike the neat dualism of later Christian theology, where Satan is cast as God's eternal enemy, Jubilees presents a universe in which Mastema is a dark but tolerated figure, whose role is to keep humans sharp through trial and temptation. In many passages, Mastema's role eerily mirrors that of Lucifer in later tradition. He's called the Prince of the Accusers, echoing the satanic role in the Book of Job, where Satan functions as a prosecuting attorney against mankind. It is Mastema who persuades God to test Abraham by commanding him to sacrifice Isaac. It is Mastema who seeks to corrupt Israel when they prepare to leave Egypt. He is described not only as a ruler of spirits, but as a cosmic adversary who sows destruction across the generations. Unlike the brief mentions of Satan in the Hebrew Bible, Mastema is a fully fleshed-out character, a kind of other Lucifer, operating in the shadows of Jewish imagination before later Christian theology would fold all these adversarial figures into one devil. To understand why Mastema has been hidden from mainstream memory, we must consider the nature of the biblical canon. The rabbis of late antiquity deliberately excluded books like Jubilees and Enoch, viewing their detailed angelologies as dangerous or speculative. Early Christians, while sometimes quoting these books, also moved away from them as church authorities tried to standardize belief. The process left us with a sanitized version of the devil, Satan, equated with Lucifer, identified with the serpent in Eden, and fused with every enemy of God. But in earlier Jewish thought, there was no single Satan. Instead, there were multiple adversarial beings, heavenly accusers, angelic rebels, and demonic princes. Mastema was one of the most powerful, but his memory survived only in Ethiopia, where the preservation of Jubilees ensured that this alternative vision of the adversary was never lost. Ethiopian tradition gave Mastema a role similar to Satan but not identical. In their liturgical worldview, evil spirits remained active agents of corruption in daily life, and Mastema was their prince. Unlike Western Christianity, which tended to place all evil under one figure, Ethiopian cosmology allowed for a hierarchy of dark beings, each with their spheres of influence. This worldview was much closer to the ancient Jewish imagination of the Second Temple period. For the people of that age, demons were not abstract metaphors for sin. They were real entities, born of rebellious angels, haunting human lives. To name Mastema was to acknowledge a reality of evil that was systemic, organized, and cunning. The parallels between Mastema and Lucifer are fascinating. Lucifer, as later interpreted, was the light-bearer who sought to ascend above God and was cast down in shame. Mastema, though not described as a fallen angel in the same sense, nevertheless functioned as a ruler of the fallen spirits and the accuser of humanity. Both figures operate with divine permission. Both are tempters, both are destroyers, and both embody the archetype of the cosmic adversary. Some scholars suggest that Mastema may have been an early template for what later theology crystallized into Satan Lucifer. Others argue that Mastema was part of a broader spectrum of adversarial beings, later merged into a single devil figure for the sake of theological simplicity. Either way, he represents a forgotten strand of the biblical story, another Lucifer, hidden not because he was unimportant, but because his presence complicated the neat lines of good and evil that later religious authorities wanted to draw. This raises profound questions about how we understand the origins of the devil. If the figure of Satan was not originally a single personality, but a composite of many, then the devil of Christian tradition is a later invention, forged out of necessity. The Hebrew Bible itself hardly speaks of Satan, and the famous passage in Isaiah 14 about the morning star falling from heaven, later applied to Lucifer, originally referred to a Babylonian king. It was only centuries later that Christian writers merged this imagery with the Satan of Job and Revelation to create the single, towering figure of Lucifer. Yet in Jubilees, we see that Jewish scribes of the Second Temple period already imagined a powerful ruler of spirits, a cosmic enemy named Mastema. The connection between him and the later Lucifer is not direct but thematic, two branches from the same root of ancient imagination, one preserved in Ethiopia, the other canonized in Rome. Why does this matter today? Because the Book of Jubilees invites us to reconsider how stories of evil were shaped and reshaped by history. The devil was not a single timeless being, but a character who evolved as different communities wrestled with the problem of evil. Mastema represents one of those paths, a road less traveled, buried in Ethiopian manuscripts and largely ignored by Western theologians. To recover his story is to realize that the narrative of good and evil is far more complex than we were taught, layered with forgotten names and lost traditions. In Mastema, we find not only a forgotten adversary, but a reminder of how much was erased when the canon was closed and the many voices of early Jewish thought were silenced. The Ethiopian preservation of Jubilees is a gift to the modern world. It shows us that ancient history is not monolithic, that there were other ways to understand the struggle between God and evil. In the shadows of that struggle stands Mastema, the other Lucifer, prince of hostility, ruler of spirits, and accuser of mankind. He is a ghostly figure half forgotten, yet still whispering through the lines of a text that survived against the odds. For those willing to look beyond the boundaries of the familiar Bible, his story reveals a world where the forces of darkness were many, not one, and where the greatest danger was not a single fallen angel, but the countless hosts he commanded. Perhaps the real lesson is that evil has always worn many faces. To collapse them into one figure was a simplification, a way to tell the story more neatly. But the Book of Jubilees reminds us that in the ancient imagination, the cosmos was alive with unseen rulers, both good and evil, whose battles shaped the destiny of humankind. Mastema, the hidden adversary, stands as a testament to that forgotten vision. He may not be the Lucifer we know, but he is certainly his shadow twin, the other Lucifer, whose name still lingers in the sacred scrolls of Ethiopia, waiting for us to remember.